Are you sure that COVID-19 is the worst thing that could ever happen to humans? I'm sorry, I have to tell you there were plenty of other deadly diseases, which carried unimaginable amounts of people's lives. Lucky to us, nowadays they can be cured with modern medicine. Let's dive into this. Hong Kong flu. Surprisingly, despite the huge threat to the country and the whole world, no quarantine was established in China. Known formally as H3N2, the flu strain was highly contagious, and left clinics in the city packed with 500,000 people infected, before it steadily spread through Asia, Australia, Africa, South America, Europe and the US. Flu symptoms typically lasted 4 to 5 days, but some cases persisted for up to 2 weeks. Also, most deaths were in those 65 and older. Did you notice the match with COVID-19? All in all, the World Health Organization and Encyclopedia Britannica estimated the number of deaths due to Hong Kong flu to be 1 to 4 million globally. At the same time, the death rate from this disease was much lower than most other 20th century pandemics. Russian flu. The Russian flu was a deadly influenza pandemic that killed approximately 1 million people around the globe. The outbreak started spreading in 1889 and was the largest 19th century epidemic of influenza. It was also the first true epidemic that happened in the era of bacteriology. The initial cases were reported in Bukhara in Central Asia, Athabasca in northwestern Canada, and Greenland. Within 6 months, the disease had infected the heart of Russia, St. Petersburg. Only 4 months later, the influenza had spread throughout the northern hemisphere. According to the scientists, the pandemic was mainly caused by the rapid population growth in urban areas across the globe. This disease also has a lot in common with COVID-19. A 2005 genomic virological study says that the virus might not have been an influenza virus, but human coronavirus OC43. Danish researchers reached a similar conclusion in 2020. They described the symptoms as very like those of COVID-19. Indeed, there was no standard treatment of the flu. For example, patients were recommended to take small doses of strychnine, which nowadays is used as a pesticide, particularly for killing small vertebrates such as birds and rodents. What's more, strychnine, when inhaled, swallowed, or absorbed through the eyes or mouth, causes poisoning, which results in muscular convulsions and eventually death through asphyxia. Among the other recommendations were whiskey and brandy, and as cheaper treatments linseed, salt, warm water, and glycerin. Many people also thought that fasting would starve the fever, based on the belief that the body would not produce as much heat with less food. As you already guessed, this was in fact poor medical advice. The sixth cholera pandemic. The sixth cholera pandemic occurred in 1899 to 1923 and was a major outbreak of cholera, or, in other words, the Blue Death. It began in India, where it killed more than 800,000 people, and spread to the Middle East, North Africa, Eastern Europe, and Russia. Someone will probably ask, why this disease is also called the Blue Death. The point is that the victims show a blue tint on their skin, after being affected with the bacteria. Actually, in the past, cholera could boast the other names as well. For instance, the French used to call it the dog death. The other names include the blue terror and the black cholera. These frightening names pale in comparison with the image of the human body, damaged by the devastating effects of cholera. No doubts, a person will die during the next 24 hours without a treatment after the appearance of the first symptoms. The main symptom of cholera is the loss of organisms fluid. An adult human body carries 44 liters of water. This water content inside the body gets distributed among the organs and the cells. Cholera can accelerate the water discharge in the body to an extent that on a worse day, the body can lose about 20 liters of water in 24 hours. Then the human body loses so much water, there will be changes to the outward appearance of the body. The eyes sink, the skin will start to lose its elasticity, and the teeth protrude. Apart from that, the blood becomes thick and the skins turn blue due to high dehydration. Briefly speaking, I wouldn't wish such an awful and painful death on my worst enemy. Also, it's important to note that cholera still exists even nowadays. But there's risk to catch this disease only in the least developed countries. Asian flu. Outbreak of influenza that was first identified in February 1957 in East Asia and then subsequently spread to countries worldwide. The 1957 flu pandemic was a pandemic of 1918 to 1919. The 1957 flu outbreak caused an estimated 1–2 million deaths worldwide and is generally considered to have been the least severe of the three influenza pandemics of the 20th century. The microbiologist Maurice Hilleman was alarmed by pictures of those affected by the virus in Hong Kong that were published in the New York Times. He obtained samples of the virus from a U.S. Navy doctor in Japan. After that, a vaccine entered trials. The number of deaths peaked the week ending 17th of October, with 600 reported in England and Wales. The vaccine was available in the same month in the United Kingdom. Although it was initially available only in limited quantities, its rapid implementation contributed to the final victory over the pandemic. Thus, Hilleman's vaccine is believed to have saved hundreds of thousands of lives. COVID-19. I suppose that you're even more aware about the origin, symptoms of this disease, the number of sick people all over the world, and its consequences on modern society. Obviously, COVID-19 is the first pandemic which managed to lock down people all over the world. There aren't any similar examples in history. The society can't even imagine its daily routine without such terms as social distancing, self-isolation, face masks and respiratory hygiene, hand washing and finally, surface cleaning. All social events were cancelled, officers and students were switched to remote mode, international borders were closed, some people couldn't even leave their houses. And all these events still take place in the modern world. What are your predictions about our future? What will 2021 be like? Modern plague. In 1894, Shenzhen was a British colony and vital port of trade. No wonder it experienced a mass influx of mainland Chinese laborers, from tradespeople to servants, who came to the city in search of employment. These almost 200,000 individuals settled primarily in this place. For some reasons the district at only about a half square mile didn't extend, therefore, huge families and workers were living on top of each other in unspeakably squalid conditions. Possessions, people, and even pigs shared single rooms, as did cattle. Such terrible conditions resulted in the arrival of the tragedy in the form of the bubonic plague. Fever, swollen glands, delirium, and even black tongue were only a few of the symptoms of the disease, the mortality rate of which was thought to be as high as 90% within Chinese communities. In total, 10 million people died from the disease. It was believed that the true carriers of the illness were fleas and rats, brought to the other region on opium ships. However, British people were convinced that their sense in mass killing of ill Chinese. Here's why. In May of 1894, a team of mostly British soldiers called Whitewash Brigade was assembled for a door-to-door inspection, disinfection, and in some cases, total destruction of homes. By the time these inspections were finished, over 7,000 people were displaced, and over 350 houses were destroyed. HIV/AIDS. Probably everyone here is aware of this disease's existence, as it's the global problem of the whole world. Its outbreak was registered in 1960 for the first time, and nowadays people still continue to suffer from this problem. Human immunodeficiency virus is notorious for attacking the body's immune system, specifically the white blood cells, called CD4 cells. HIV destroys these CD4 cells, weakening a person's immunity against infections such as tuberculosis and some cancers. As for AIDS, it's the most advanced stage of HIV infection. People, who may be at risk, should immediately access testing. If the result is positive, they should be offered and linked to antiretroviral treatment as soon as possible following diagnosis. Luckily, this treatment also prevents HIV transmission to others, in case it's taken systematically. The most probable ways of catching HIV are unprotected sex, the usage of dirty needles, contact with blood, or breast milk of a person with HIV. As you already guessed, this disease is still actual nowadays, that's why there's a strong need in staying safe and taking precautions. Black Plague. The bubonic plague, which occurred in the 14th century, literally devastated the whole Europe and Asia. As always, the outbreak began in Asia and, once again, was carried throughout the world by rats, covered with infected fleas. After its appearance in Europe, it spread death and destruction. Europe lost 60% of its population due to the Black Death. Symptoms of this disease began with swelling of the lymph nodes, either in the groin, armpit, or neck. After 6 to 10 days of infection and sickness, 80% of infected people die. The virus was spread via blood and airborne particles. Without any doubt, this epidemic changed the course of European history. The lack of understanding of the origin of the disease led the Christian population to blame the Jewish community for poisoning the water wells. As a result of this accusation, thousands of Jews were killed. Others believed it was punishment dealt from heaven for being sinful. The world saw agricultural shortages, which resulted in malnutrition and hunger. After the ending of the Black Plague, the decline in population led to increased wages and cheap land. The available area was used for animal husbandry, and, therefore, meat consumption throughout the region increased. At least there were little advantages in such a horrendous pandemic. Plague of Justinian. Indeed, pandemics, which took place in ancient times, seemed to be the real horror for humans, as there were no medicine or vaccines. Moreover, in most cases it was believed that plagues were just God's wrath and punishment for human sins. The same can be applied to the plague of Justinian. As always, rats were the main enemies of humanity. This plague was able to spread so quickly, because it was carried on the backs of rodents, whose fleas were infected with the bacteria. These rats traveled all over the world on trading ships and helped spread the infection from China to northern Africa and all over the Mediterranean. Also, the name for this plague was chosen not without the reason. It's believed that its widespreadness contributed to the fall of the Byzantine Empire. The military lost power and was no longer able to fend off intruders. Farmers became sick, and agricultural production declined. Consequently, with a smaller agricultural base, income taxes fell. Thousands of people died daily at the height of the destructive plague. Spanish flu. One of the deadliest flu pandemic in history started in 1918 and infected about one-third of the world's population, or approximately 500 million people. Approximately 25 million of those deaths came in the first 25 weeks of the outbreak. People fell ill all over the world, including people on remote Pacific islands and in the Arctic. The Spanish flu was initially seen in Europe, the United States, and Asia before spreading across the globe. Among the major symptoms were skin turning blue and lungs filling with fluid, which resulted in suffocation. Victims of the influenza were dying within hours and days of developing symptoms. The average lifespan in the U.S. had decreased by 12 years after the Spanish flu had been around for only 1 year. Notably, this pandemic affected completely healthy and strong young adults, while leaving children and those with weaker immune systems still alive. Schools, private homes, and other buildings became makeshift hospitals, due to overcrowding in medical facilities. Quarantines were imposed, people were ordered to wear masks, and businesses were shut down until the virus completed its deadly run. Here's the end of the top. Do you still think that COVID-19 is the worst thing ever happened to humans? The answer is no, but it doesn't mean that we can devalue the negative experience of the latest plague. Over 2 million people have died from this disease all over the world, and much more got plenty of complications after recovery. Besides, it's important to always appreciate the doctor's work, who managed to save lots of lives, relegating their families and private lives to the background. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video and leave a comment below. Stay tuned.